of the campaign. But whilst investors see the Tories as the most market-friendly, or perhaps the least worst option, predicting the great British voting public has become notoriously difficult. And in a race that only lasts 5 weeks, there is still a week to go. Live in London, I'm Caroline Hepker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Caroline, thanks. And on the corporate front, we have a leadership change at one of the world's biggest tech companies. The founders of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, are stepping down from Alphabet. They're handing the reins to Google CEO Sundar Pichai. Here with reaction, Gene Munster. He's the managing partner at Loop Ventures.
I was not expecting this, but in some ways I wasn't surprised. The company is moving into a different chapter. Google proper, the next chapter is going to be a lot around policy and data privacy and regulation. There's another part of me that's just sad because they've had such a profound impact on our lives, and just a reminder that even the greats move on.
Sundar Pichai will have oversight of both Google and Alphabet. Larry Page and Sergey Brin are still controlling shareholders, and they will remain on the board.
And futures are moving higher this morning. S&P futures up almost 12 points down. Dow futures up 116. And NASDAQ E-mini futures are higher by 44 points. 10-year Treasury down 7/32. The yield 1.74%. 2-year Treasury yield 1.55%. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
And it's now 6:07 on Wall Street. Let's get news from around the world. We say good morning to Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
John, thank you very much. President Trump attacked one of the leaders of the impeachment inquiry, calling him a very sick man. It comes as a House Intelligence Committee report calls for Trump's removal. Bloomberg's Bob Moon has the latest.
The report approved by the committee on a party line vote seeks to make the case that Trump's actions require urgent attention by Congress, calling the threat he'll continue his behavior a clear and present danger.
There is, I think, grave risk to the country with waiting until we have every last fact.
Chairman Adam Schiff says the evidence of Trump's misconduct is overwhelming. In London, Trump fired back with perhaps his most personal attack yet.
I think Adam Schiff is a deranged human being.
Today, the House Judiciary Committee takes the handoff, hearing from a panel of impeachment scholars on whether Trump should be removed from office. Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak.
The House report also claims there was contact between President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and the top Republican on the intelligence panel, Congressman Devin Nunes. According to the report, it includes phone records that show Giuliani also engaged in frequent contacts with the White House and with Lev Parnas, a Giuliani associate who is under indictment on charges of using foreign money to make illegal campaign contributions. The calls took place at around the same time Giuliani was leading the effort to oust the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. According to the report, Nunes also had multiple contacts in April with Parnas. President Trump is in London for a second day of meetings with fellow NATO leaders. President Trump's first day included multiple impromptu press conferences, including a tense exchange with French President Emmanuel Macron. President Trump also met yesterday with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson without the press. Today, Johnson talked about the meeting.
We had a very good meeting, and we discussed, as you can imagine, the future of NATO. We discussed what's going on in Syria and various other security matters.
Today, President Trump will meet with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Republican Congressman Duncan Hunter of California has pleaded guilty to misusing campaign funds. Assistant U.S. Attorney Phil Halpern.
Mr. Hunter now faces resignation, disgrace, and imprisonment.
Hunter could get up to 5 years in prison. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden plans to pay for $3.2 trillion in policy proposals with new and higher taxes on the wealthy and corporations. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thank you. 6:10 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. And here's John Steschauer.
John, a local coach got fired yesterday. It was not the Giants' Pat Shurmur or the Knicks' David Fizdale, two coaches with a combined record of 28 and 103. So those firings could be coming, but it was the Devils, another struggling team, who fired John Hines, promoted assistant Elaine Nasruddin. The Devils' GM is Ray Shero.
I don't think there's any one player that is performing even at the level, let alone above, that we'd expect or maybe they expect. So that's the thing that's disappointing. You know, obviously change brings opportunity, not only for Elaine Nasruddin, but also for our players, and there's opportunity for them, and to find out kind of where we are here and where we're going to go.
Nasruddin behind the bench last night in Newark. Vegas, the night after beating the Rangers at the Garden 4-1, beat the Devils 4-3. Jonathan Marchessault, 3 goals in the third period for Vegas. The Devils fall to 9-14-4. The Islanders playing back-to-back road games. They had the win in Detroit, but last night lost in Montreal 4-2. The Canadiens end an 8-game losing streak. An NFL coach got fired. Ron Rivera in Carolina. The Panthers, 4 years after going 15-1 and then to the Super Bowl, are 5-7 with 4 straight losses. College basketball, half dozen games between the ACC and the Big Ten, including 2 teams ranked in the top 4. Number 1 Louisville won 58-43 over Michigan, who came in 7-0 under new coach Juwan Howard. Duke won at Michigan State 87-75, already the 3rd loss for the Spartans. Rutgers fell at Pittsburgh 71-60. Iowa beat Syracuse 68-54, and closer to home, St. John's improved to 7-2, 79-69 over St. Peter's. The 2 big free agent pitchers are both in Southern California, both represented by Scott Boras, and yesterday the Yankees met with both Garrett Cole and Steven Strasburg. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. John?
All right, John, thanks a lot. And ahead of the cash open on Wall Street, futures point to a higher U.S. Open. The Dow futures up 117, S&P futures 11 points higher. This is Bloomberg.
The lifeblood of tech startups isn't just money. It's executive and technical skills. The kind of skills that companies need to build real products. And the skills that venture capitalist Chris Sugden of Edison Partners sees in the graduates that are coming out of New Jersey Institute of Technology.
The amazing thing about NJIT is their graduates, they have multiple offers on average, not just one. They're coming out with real skill sets that are immediately hireable and available to them. I think we see an understanding by the faculty and administration at NJIT that we've got to train and educate the whole student, not just their, one side of their brain. And I do think that's sort of part of the DNA today. There's practical and there's sort of academia, and merging those two together and understanding that if we're going to have our young people go get great jobs and have great successful careers, they've got to have both sides of their brain activated. And I think we see that with NJIT.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Get your home ready for Christmas. At littlewoods.com, you can order selected sofas, beds, and dining room furniture now and get them delivered in time for Christmas. Perfect for welcoming all of your guests. All with inclusive delivery and free returns. Own Christmas. Shop now at littlewoods.com. Order by 19th of December.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night. And somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here. Testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
On 3, our unlimited data is actually unlimited, like 4 reels. That means you can scroll and scroll and scroll through all the Black Friday deals.
Because we have no speed limits, no data caps, and you'll be 5G ready at no extra cost.
Wow, so many savings.
Our Black Friday deals are now on. Save up to £480. Switch to 3, in-store or online. See 3.co.uk/unlimited-data. Savings on selected phones on 24-month contracts. Ends 5th of December. Terms apply.
Rainy, 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 rainy. Sergey, why are you in such a good mood? It's raining. And rain means we take meal pups to cinema. And cinema means they'll be entertained. And entertained means they're also quiet for a couple of hours. Oh, let's go. Enjoy more time together with 2-for-1 cinema tickets from Meerkat Movies with the Meerkat app when you buy through Compare the Market. Qualifying purchases, Tuesdays or Wednesdays, participating cinemas, 2 standard tickets only, cheapest free. T's and C's apply.
From Bloomberg Television, here's Taylor Briggs.
U.S. stocks in the red on Monday, with tech leading the losses. That tech-heavy NASDAQ closing down more than 1%. But the tech sector remains the star performer in 2019, returning more than 40% relative to the S&P's 25% gain this year. Joining me from New York to discuss if there's a FANG overhang or if there is further room to run, it is Piper Jaffray's Chief Market Technician, Craig Johnson. Craig, thank you for joining me. Talk to me just for a moment here about today's price action. Something bigger that's happening that's creating the tech sell-off, or just a momentary pause?
I think this is more or less, Taylor, just a momentary pause. From our perspective, the market's had a very sharp advance, over 25%, coming off the lows we had seen in December. Stocks have gotten a little bit ahead of themselves, but, from a technical perspective, we've seen, 70+% of stocks above their RSI. We've seen an expansion in overall market breadth. We've seen tech leading this push higher. Wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of profit taking in here. And Taylor, might I just add that, this is a market that's really been pushed higher by the fact that really on the FOMO trade, fear of missing out. We're going to get some sort of trade deal done in Washington, and that equity markets are going to continue to push ahead.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm Nathan Hager. This update is brought to you by IBKR and CME Group. The new micro E-mini futures contracts are available at IBKR at the lowest commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/CME Mini. Bloomberg Daybreak is out on customer terminals, bringing you all the news you need to start your day. Let's check the latest headlines now with Hannah George at the Bloomberg Daybreak desk. Good morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Nathan. The US and China are close to agreeing on the amount of tariffs to roll back for a Phase 1 trade deal. That's according to sources who say progress is being made despite tension over human rights issues and protests in Hong Kong. Sundar Pichai is taking over Alphabet as Larry Page and Sergey Brin step down. In addition to heading up Google, Pichai will now oversee everything from self-driving cars to delivery drones. OPEC and its allies are giving mixed signals on whether they'll deepen output cuts. Sources tell us an OPEC advisory committee did not discuss steeper cutbacks at its most recent gathering. And Carl Icahn is urging HP to continue takeover talks with Xerox. The activist investor says a tie-up may yield more than $2 billion in synergies. For all the news you need to start your day, check out Daybreak on your mobile phone on the Bloomberg Anywhere app. Nathan.
All right, Hannah, thank you. Now let's see how stocks are faring. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures higher by 13 points. Dow futures up 130. NASDAQ futures a gain of 47 points. 10 years down 730 seconds, yield 1.73%. 2-year 1.55%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.5% to $56.96 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.1% to $14.8220 an ounce. The euro 1.1071 against the dollar. The yen at 108.68. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Nathan, the House Judiciary Committee will weigh findings by fellow lawmakers that President Donald Trump misused the power of his office for personal political gain and then obstructed Congress's investigation as possible grounds for impeachment. The committee is prepared this morning for its first hearing since the release of a 300-page report by Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee that found serious misconduct by the president. Today, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg rejected French criticism that the military alliance is suffering from brain death and insisted that the organization is adapting to modern challenges. It comes as President Trump will attend a second day of NATO meetings in London. In the NHL, the Islanders and Devils lost. The Bruins and Capitals won. In the NBA, the Wizards lost. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
And Bloomberg Daybreak being brought to you by Inovalon, a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare for insurance companies, physicians, pharmacy, and pharmaceutical companies. Inovalon data has a story to tell. Inovalon gives it a voice. 6:20 on Wall Street. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Now, U.S. stock futures are getting a lift today following the Bloomberg News exclusive on U.S.-China trade talks. Sources tell us the two sides are moving closer to agreeing on the amount of tariffs to be rolled back in a phase one deal. Joining us now with details is Brendan Murray, who's in charge of all our trade coverage here at Bloomberg News. He joins us from our London studios. Brendan, I feel like I have whiplash. Is there a deadline or not?
Yeah, it is deja vu for sure. The U.S. and China, according to the officials that we're talking to, are indeed getting closer to this phase one agreement that President Trump announced about 7 weeks ago. So this is a rather interesting development, and but like you said, there's been a lot of twists and turns in this.
I don't know about you. I haven't done my Christmas shopping yet. I'll probably do it after the 15th, just because of time constraints. And if I go out shopping and find that everything's more expensive, I'm not going to be a happy camper. Is that a factor in any of this?
Well, it shouldn't. The way supply chains work globally, the costs of the extra tariffs shouldn't be felt by consumers for a couple of months. So you're safe to, if you want to procrastinate till after December 15th.
Okay, so what's the next step I'm looking for in all this?
The next step we're looking for is some sign from either side, Washington or Beijing, that they have agreed to the amount of tariffs that the U.S. is going to roll back, and that China has agreed to a dollar figure of agricultural purchases that they're going to make.
Could I be forgiven for thinking that maybe back at the White House in the background of all this are two competing forces? Maybe I'll just throw some names out there: a Larry Kudlow versus Robert Lighthizer, and competing agendas.
Absolutely. All along, there are the doves and the hawks, each with, one of President Trump's ears. And lately, we've heard some of the more hawkish members, getting the upper hand in this with some tariffs that the president has announced this week. So there's definitely a push and pull, and, markets are obviously reflecting that, going down pretty sharply yesterday and rebounding today.
Well, since you bring up the markets, I don't know if this is quite the expertise for us, but what's priced in right now, can we say?
Phase one seems to be priced in, so if we get anything less than that or talks fall apart, then that would be looked at, according to the folks that we talk to, as a real negative for markets right now. As far as the market is concerned today, it looks like they're gaining more confidence that it won't fall apart.
Okay. The other factors that weigh into this, well, the question is whether or not they do. The legislation, a bipartisan Congress, believe it or not, passing legislation with respect to the Chinese treatment of Muslim minorities. Also, the legislation regarding the protests in anti-Chinese protests, the pro-democracy protesters. What is, if anything, does that factor into these talks?
The people who we talk to say it shouldn't factor into these talks, that they're very focused on the trade issues. That said, China's foreign ministry came out today and blasted U.S. lawmakers, calling them too ignorant, too shameless, and too hypocritical, to use their words.
And we had talked previously yesterday about the possibility of currencies being linked to trade, not necessarily with China, but is there going to be some sort of a currency war coming out of this?
Well, this, if you read President Trump's tweet from the other day, he wants the Fed to lower rates, and that would, weaken the dollar. This, sort of sends a message to other countries that, it's okay to jawbone your currency lower or higher, or, whichever direction you want it to go in. So that's definitely in the backdrop here. Every country, the U.S. included in the G20, agreed not to do this. So the president coming out, sending that signal.
All right, Brendan. Thanks a lot. Brendan Murray from London this morning. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Despite the heated rhetoric over U.S.-China trade recently, Bloomberg has learned that the two sides are, in fact, moving closer to a Phase 1 agreement. People familiar with the matter say President Donald Trump's comments downplaying the urgency of a deal should not be taken to mean the talks were stalling, as he was speaking off the cuff. U.S. negotiators expect an initial deal to be done before U.S. tariffs are set to rise on December 15th. Trade jitters hit Wall Street yesterday, knocking 280 points from the Dow, but the Dow futures up 116 points. Crude oil is climbing this morning at $56.83 a barrel. For the second straight month of sales, Mercedes-Benz has edged out German luxury rival BMW by about 2,500 vehicles. Mercedes saw total deliveries climb almost 9%. BMW gained around 10% in November. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Christmas, a time for sharing gifts and laughter, and photos and videos. Make the most of it with a SIM-only deal packed with data from Tesco Mobile. Like a 10-gig SIM for just £13 a month. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile today. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 29th of December. 12-month contract and unlocked 4G-enabled phone required. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Coffee shop, cashback, cat flaps, cashback, beanbags, rucksack, hire car, buy a car, flapjack, cashback, dumbbells, cashback, takeaway, holiday to anywhere the sun is at, bum bag, laptop, big match, hatchback, binge watching, paintballing, crab fishing, cashback, anything you want to buy, everywhere you want to go. Guess what? Cashback. Whatever you spend your money on, get money back every time with the American Express Platinum Cashback Everyday Credit Card. Search Amex Cashback. Representative 22.9% APR variable. Minimum annual spend to receive cashback. Terms apply. 18 plus subject to approval.
At TUI, we can help you find the perfect getaway for two. We fly to over 70 destinations worldwide, so wherever you have in mind, we'll help you get there. Book now and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. Book online or in-store with one of our travel experts. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Offer available on selected holidays for a limited time and subject to availability. Booking T's and C's apply. At or protected.
Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping, and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
As the impeachment inquiry moves on to the next level, the House Judiciary Committee is holding its first hearings to decide whether to draft 4 more articles of impeachment.
Inquiry into Donald J. Trump, the 45th President of the United States. Trump did not give an expletive about Ukraine.
Listen today to hear an expert panel discuss the grounds for presidential impeachment and whether President Trump's actions in the Ukraine scandal are in fact impeachable. Search Impeachment News on TuneIn to listen.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And it's 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm John Tucker. Bloomberg Daybreak being brought to you by IBKR, the professionals' gateway to the world's markets. Their clients enjoy lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, forex, and fixed income from a single integrated account. Learn more at IBKR.com.
And we're just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures, they're gaining after positive developments on U.S.-China trade talks. Bloomberg News has learned the two sides are moving closer to an agreement, which could be sealed before December 15th. We get the very latest now from Bloomberg's Tom Busby.
Sources say the U.S. and China are moving closer to agreeing on the amount of tariffs to be rolled back in a Phase 1 trade deal. People familiar with the matter say U.S. negotiators expect a Phase 1 deal with China to be completed before tariffs are set to rise on December 15th. That's despite ramped-up tensions over human rights issues and protests in Hong Kong. Still, there are outstanding issues on how to guarantee China's purchases of U.S. farm goods and exactly which tariffs will be rolled back. I'm Tom Busby, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Tom. We have big corporate news as well, with word that Google founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin are stepping down from their roles at Alphabet. More on that story now from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, will also be the CEO of Alphabet. Both Page and Brin, the major shareholders, will remain on the company board. In a statement, Page and Brin wrote, quote, "We are deeply committed to Google and Alphabet for the long term and will remain actively involved as board members, shareholders, and co-founders." Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Charlie. On the earnings front, shares of Salesforce fell about 2% in late trading. The software maker gave a profit forecast that fell short of estimates. Campbell Soup and H&R Block report results today.
Billionaire investor Carl Icahn is pushing HP to move ahead with takeover talks from Xerox. In a letter to shareholders, Icahn says a tie-up between the two companies could lead to more than $2 billion in synergies.
And sources tell us Saudi Aramco is considering pricing its IPO at the top of its marketed range. That could raise more than $25 billion for the state-owned company.
And in the UK, the pound hit the strongest level since May. Traders are stepping up bets on a Conservative win at next week's election, as the polls show Boris Johnson's party holding its lead over Labour. Right now, British pound sterling, it is at $1.30. That is up 0.4% against the greenback.
Well, the euro is weakening against the dollar, 1.1070, and the yen is at 108.65. Futures are higher. S&P futures up 13 points right now. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
It is now 6:33 on Wall Street. This news update being brought to you by the Jewish Communal Fund. JCF's donor-advised fund is the smart choice to manage your philanthropy. Open a JCF fund now to lock in a 2019 tax deduction. Visit jcfny.org. Let's get news from around the world this morning. Once again, here's Michael Barr.
John, thank you very much. The House Judiciary Committee takes over the impeachment inquiry into President Trump today. The committee will hear from constitutional scholars as it begins to consider whether the evidence laid out in a 300-page report from the Intelligence Committee warrants impeachment. Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff said the president misused the power of his office to get his political dirty work done.
I am gravely concerned that if we merely accept this, that we invite not only further corruption of our elections by this president, but we also invite it of the next president.
The White House said Schiff's report reflects nothing more than the frustrations of Democrats. Meanwhile, Republican lawmakers held a news conference last night in response to the report. Doug Collins, the ranking member on the House Judiciary Committee, says he thinks the Democrats have a problem.
Tomorrow provides nothing except a dreary-eyed, drowsy proposal for this country to watch as the impeachment process slowly drags on with no direction, no focus, because they're having one big problem. And the big problem is the president did nothing wrong, and they can't prove it.
President Trump is in London for a second day for more meetings with fellow NATO leaders. Yesterday, there was a tense exchange in front of the cameras between President Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron. Trump suggested to Macron that many of the ISIS fighters who were captured were coming from places in Europe like France, but Macron pushed back on that, saying the majority of them are from the Mideast.
Would you like some nice ISIS fighters? Yeah, I can give them. You can take everyone you want.
Let's be serious. The very large number of fighters you have on the ground are ISIS fighters coming from Syria, from Iraq, and the region. It is true that you have foreign fighters coming from Europe, but this is a tiny minority of the overall problem we have.
Today, Trump will meet with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Democrat Kamala Harris suspended her presidential campaign after months of declining poll numbers and dwindling funds. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thank you. Coming up on 6:36 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John's Stash Hour.
John, 26 games into the NHL season, the Devils decided they had seen enough under coach John Hines. Only 9 wins and weekend losses to the Rangers and Sabres by a combined score of 11-1. Hines was in his 5th season. Only once did he get the Devils to the playoffs. The new coach, at least on an interim basis, is assistant Elaine Nasreddine.
Obviously, a lot of emotions. Just found out a couple hours ago, so a lot goes through your mind. Can't help but think about John and the relationship we've had the last 10 years, and those are not great circumstances. It is an opportunity, but it's going to take time to settle in. But we have a game to win tonight, so that's where the focus is right now.
And that game turned out to be another loss, beaten by Vegas 4-3. The Islanders lost in Montreal 4-2. College basketball saw St. John's beat St. Peter's 79-69. Rutgers beaten by Pittsburgh 71-60, part of the ACC Big Ten Challenge. It also saw top-ranked Louisville beat 4th-ranked Michigan. Duke with a win at Michigan State. No change at the top from the College Football Playoff Committee: Ohio State, LSU, Clemson, and Georgia. But there will be change when they reveal the final rankings, because LSU plays Georgia on Saturday. The feeling is unbeaten LSU will get into the playoff even with a loss, but Georgia won't, and then the final spot would go to either Utah, Oklahoma, or Baylor. Carolina Panthers have fired coach Ron Rivera. Panthers 5-7. They've lost 4 in a row. Assistant Perry Fuel takes over for the rest of the season. And as for Pat Shurmur and the 2-10 Giants, co-owner Steve Tisch says he and John Mara will talk at season's end. He admits the season has been very frustrating. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. John?
All right, John, thanks a lot. Coming up today, we get the first of 3 readings on the labor market this week. ADP issues data on business hiring at 8:15 a.m. Wall Street time. Economists surveyed by Bloomberg forecast a moderate 140,000 gain in November. Here with more is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Bloomberg Economics says the ADP data will probably show hiring momentum remain roughly in line with what it calls the recent soft pace. October's report showed a gain of 125,000 private payroll jobs, below the year-to-date average. Today's ADP report sets the stage for Friday's monthly employment report. We could see a rebound in that data now that the General Motors strike has ended. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, thanks, Vinny. It is now 6:38 on Wall Street, and that's time for the Bloomberg Small Business Report. In her previous job at Freddie Mac, Tisa Clark was in a position to see the bottom was about to drop out of the housing market, and that was her cue to go out on her own. She started J.D. Clark, a small contracting firm specializing in maintaining bank-owned properties.
We initially started with just maintaining those properties, so be it securing them when the foreclosure took place, maintaining them, keeping the grounds, dealing with health and safety, and then it branched into renovations because, of course, they were trying to sell the properties to get them off their books.
J.D. Clark has expanded beyond foreclosed properties, serving Washington, Maryland, and Virginia. Among the biggest challenges, she says, was being taken seriously in a male-dominated industry.
The name of my company is J.D. Clark, which is me, J.D., but they just assumed that J.D. was some man somewhere, and they would initially ask, where's JD? Is JD coming?
Now with 12 employees, dozens of subs, Tisa J.D. Clark has earned the respect of her male peers, and that's the Bloomberg Small Business Report. 6:39 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
Why on earth is Roku stock so expensive? I'm Tara LaChapelle, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Shares of Roku, the maker of streaming TV devices, have more than quadrupled this year. That's left the company valued at a whopping 280 times EBITDA, a measure of profit. To put that into perspective, that makes Roku almost 10 times more expensive than Netflix. Earlier this week, Morgan Stanley analysts were the latest to warn investors that Roku stock gains may be getting out of hand, and that led to a steep one-day sell-off. Still, Roku devices account for 44% of all connected TV viewing hours, according to industry researcher Conviva. Amazon's Fire TV is in a distant second place, while Apple TV is even further behind. But competition is intensifying as the streaming wars heat up, so Roku's growth will probably start to slow. Even if Roku doesn't get trampled by the streaming giants, its lavish stock price will keep taking hits. I'm Tara LaChapelle. For more Bloomberg Opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
Now, Bloomberg Opinion commentaries can be heard every weekday at this time. Terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. Just ahead, we'll take apart the top stories from our nation's capital with Kathleen Hunter, our Washington reporter. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA/SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can feel your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
This winter, there's no place like Wicked, the award-winning West End musical. Discover the incredible untold story of the Witches of Oz and how one came to be called good and the other wicked. Wicked at London's Apollo Victoria Theatre. Extra shows added for Christmas.
The very thought of you.
Michael Bublé. See him performing in the most picturesque and beautiful outdoor settings across the UK in July and August with Priority. If you're on O2, get Priority tickets up to 48 hours before general release right now. Search for Priority. Michael Bublé, live across the UK in July and August. Unforgettable live music experiences with O2. O2, breathe it all in. Terms apply.
When it comes to music, I've heard it all. Pink Floyd, Sean Paul, Slipknot. But in the Witch Test Lab, hearing isn't enough. When we test headphones, we really listen. Not just to the music, but to the stuff that gets in the way. The traffic, the chatter, all that. Mind the gap. We simulate the loudest commute to find you the headphones that cancel out the noise. So you know we're only recommending the best.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
My name's Ian, and I run the Christmas Centres for Crisis. Many people in Britain are homeless, stuck in hostels, sleeping on floors, even on the street. You can change this. Our Christmas Centres provide people with food, safety and support, and show them how Crisis can help them find a home and a job in the year ahead. You can reserve a place at Crisis this Christmas for just £28.87. Search Support Crisis Reserve and help someone take their first step out of homelessness this Christmas. Thank you.
Connecting decision makers to a network of news and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
The House Judiciary Committee holds its first impeachment hearing this morning, calling expert witnesses to discuss constitutional grounds for impeachment. The panel has received the report of the Intelligence Committee findings released late yesterday, with Chairman Adam Schiff saying the evidence is clear. President Trump abused the power of his office.
The president will have to answer for that, and we will have to decide here in Congress whether this is what the founders had in mind when they provided a remedy to a president that is violating the public trust and endangering the national security.
From Vatican City, the announcement that Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of Bishop Richard Malone of Buffalo following widespread criticism over his handling of allegations of clergy sexual misconduct. At the NATO summit, President Trump holding separate meetings today with German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the Italian and Danish prime ministers. He met last night with Britain's Boris Johnson. Stock futures are showing solid gains overnight following yesterday's losses on Wall Street. I'm Michael Foscano.
Impact Mortgage Corp. DBA Cash Call Mortgage. NMLS 128.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm Nathan Hager. U.S. futures are moving higher this morning. Let's head right over to the First Word Breaking News Desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Good morning, Bill.
And good morning, Nathan. U.S. futures did spike early on reports that the U.S. and China are moving closer to a trade deal. Dow futures now up 140 points. S&P's gained 14, and NASDAQ futures climbed by 51. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.74%. Gold is down 2, and Hong Kong fell 1.3% overnight, while European markets are also rising, led by 1.3% gains in France, and the pound surged as polls showed the conservatives have increased their lead. Back in the U.S. on the economic front at 8:15, ADP employment change estimate 135,000. At 9:45, market U.S. services and composite PMIs, and at 10 o'clock, the ISM non-manufacturing index. After the bell last night, Salesforce beat estimates, and Workday boosted its outlook for subscription revenue. And regarding earnings this morning, look for Campbell Soup to report around 7:30. In other news, MasterCard is buying back $8 billion in stock, also boosted its dividend. And wrapping things up, Zimmer Biomet was raised to strong buy over at Raymond James. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Nathan.
All right, Bill, thanks. To hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on the terminal, SQUAWK. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Good morning. NATO meetings continue outside London. President Trump arrived and posed for a quick photo op and exchanged pleasantries with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. This morning on Twitter, the president writes that he and Johnson discussed NATO and trade. Johnson had asked President Trump not to weigh in on the general election that will take place in the UK next week. And yesterday, the president said he would comply. The impeachment inquiry into President Trump shifts today to the House Judiciary Committee. In the NHL, the Islanders and Devils lost. The Bruins and Capitals won. In the NBA, the Wizards lost. Finally, from daybreak on the Bloomberg, in the race to make shopping as easy as possible, retailers are turning to the honor system. Shoppers are relied to be honest and pay without being monitored by cameras, sensors, and software. In New York, Iris Nova sells $10 drink bottles in a small store that does not have employees or cash register. Customers pay for drinks by text message and go. John, so far, theft rates are low.
I suppose it depends on what you're selling. I'm not sure that model would work in Tiffany.
No, I don't think that would. Just come back and pay. We trust you. I trust you. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
Too much trust. 6:50 on Wall Street. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. Time now to check what's going on in D.C. Some of the top stories in our nation's capital include The House of Representatives overwhelmingly approving legislation that would impose sanctions on Chinese officials over human rights abuses against Muslim minorities. Now, with more on this and the other stories that we're following this morning, we're joined by Bloomberg Washington reporter Kathleen Hunter. Kate, good morning to you. A rare show of bipartisan support for this legislation. Of course, it follows the bill supporting protesters in Hong Kong. What has been the reaction, if any, so far from Chinese officials?
Well, Chinese officials have essentially indicated that they may take retaliatory measures against U.S. companies that they deem unreliable. That certainly, I think, is in keeping with what the kind of rhetoric we heard from Beijing after the passage of the Hong Kong legislation, which they also, had issues with. And so I think it's a clear example of Congress really, going around the president in some ways to weigh in on some of these issues that have an impact on U.S.-China relations and making things a bit more complicated for the Trump administration.
To be clear, he's expected to sign this bill, right?
That's right. And he also, same with the Hong Kong legislation. So it's not necessarily something that the Trump administration opposes per se. It's more that perhaps it's an issue that would be a little less awkward if it didn't come up right now.
Is this going to be linked to the trade talks?
Yeah, I think that's the concern, is that it's another complicating factor like the Hong Kong legislation. Now, that being said, we do have a story on the terminal now that indicates that, despite this and despite some of the heated rhetoric of the past 24 hours, namely Trump, talking about how a deal on China trade might have to wait until after the election, it sounds like progress behind the scenes is being made. And so I think it's important to stay tuned and see what could be done in terms of a phase one trade deal, which seems to be the more limited scope that the negotiators are pursuing right now. It seems like that is still moving forward behind the scenes.
Yeah, we're getting whiplash from the day-to-day headlines of the trade front. Kathleen, also making news this morning, NATO, the leaders gathering outside of London. It sounds like there's been a U-turn by one of the participants, namely one Donald Trump.
That's right. So Donald Trump, spent the first 2-3 years of his presidency being one of NATO's biggest detractors. And now we're seeing, faced with Emmanuel Macron, the French president's criticism of NATO, as he described it as experiencing brain death. We're seeing Trump kind of pulling a U-turn here and essentially defending NATO, which is different from what we've heard from him in the past. And I think in some ways, it's important to regard that in the context of Emmanuel Macron, his profile in terms of a European leader is on the rise, particularly with Angela Merkel, the German chancellor's career, in its twilight. And so I think that in some ways this is Trump, positioning himself vis-a-vis the person that he sees as his chief rival in Europe. And that's a dynamic that I think bears watching going forward.
Is he trying to immerse himself in foreign policy as a way to forget about the possible impeachment at home?
Well, certainly this trip, the NATO summit this week is well timed in the sense that we know that the Judiciary panel is going to be launching its first hearing into impeachment today. And so that's something that in some ways it gives Trump an opportunity to talk about something different, to be on the other side of the Atlantic and looking statesmanlike. Now, whether or not he's taken full advantage of that, I think is arguable. And I think that, it hasn't been as bad for him. He hasn't looked as isolated as he has in some of these past summits. But, on the other hand, it hasn't been all positive for him. And he's also, to an extent that we've seen him do before, been picking fights with some of his allies.
There's this remarkable video that we watched this morning, some gossip on the sidelines. Tell us what that's about.
Yeah, so there's a video that emerged. It's a lesson to all of us, even the world's, leaders, that, you never know who's listening. And when there are cameras around, you always have to be a bit careful to, not have an unguarded moment. And basically what we saw last night was Emmanuel Macron, Justin Trudeau, and Boris Johnson seeming to, giggle and laugh a bit about Trump's propensity for impromptu, lengthy press conferences that tend to make him late for events. And so, it's just a bit awkward, I guess. And, I think it'll be interesting to see what, if anything, Trump has to say today when he gets asked about it. Boris Johnson was asked about it and whether or not, when he arrived at the NATO summit this morning, and whether or not he was avoiding being photographed with Trump, and he said that he wasn't. But I think that it raises some potentially prickly issues.
And finally, let's wrap up with this story. Joe Biden has a plan to pay for his policy proposals. What is it?
Yeah, so this is another iteration of a plan that we've seen from Democrats for many, many years now, which is essentially increasing taxes on corporations and trying to repatriate money that has gone overseas as a way to, in concert with Biden's other proposals, which would raise taxes on the highest earners, pay for some of his policy proposals. And so that's kind of the gist of it. This is kind of not a completely new idea, but just the latest iteration of it.
Okay, so is imposing sanctions, and how much does he say that's going to repatriate?
So the repatriation portion of it, I think his team estimates is at about $200 billion, which would be short of, Biden, much like Elizabeth Warren and other Democratic contenders, has a lot of policy proposals. His are to the tune of $3.2 trillion. And so that would be a portion of it. I think that, it also, much like with Elizabeth Warren's Medicare for All proposals, there are questions about whether Democrats are overpromising here in terms of what they're actually going to be able to get through and actually going to be able to generate the revenue for. But certainly that's what Biden is trying to address with these new proposals, is how he's going to raise the money to do what he wants to do.
Kathleen, always a pleasure. Thanks very much. We appreciate it. You can read more about these stories on Bloomberg.com or on the Bloomberg Terminal. And a reminder, you can follow all the latest on Bloomberg Radio in Washington. That's Bloomberg 99.1 and 105.7 FM HD2. Nathan.
John, thank you. It is 6:56 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Green Report. Here's Bob Moon.
Yet another indication of how far off track we inhabitants of planet Earth are in meeting the world's global warming targets, as envoys from almost 200 countries attend a 2-week United Nations conference on the issue. A report from the World Meteorologic Organization warns the planet's average temperature is rising faster than previously thought, headed for a gain that may be triple the goal set by the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. Instead of holding the rise to within 2 degrees Fahrenheit, the new findings suggest an increase of 5.4 to 9 degrees. It would mark the biggest shift in temperatures since the last ice age ended some 10,000 years ago. These are among the changes that scientists see a 4-degree gain triggering. Ice vanishing from both poles, many rainforests turning to desert, rising sea levels flooding into the interior of continents, and irreversible loss of diversity among plants and animals. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
All right, Bob, thank you. Green on the screen this morning after a Bloomberg News report that China and the U.S. are moving closer to a trade deal despite recent heated rhetoric. S&P futures are higher by 15 points right now. Dow futures up 147. NASDAQ futures a gain of 52 points. DAX in Germany up 1.2%. The CAC in Paris higher by 1.4%. 10-year Treasury down 6/32. The yield 1.73%. 2-year yield 1.54%. COMEX gold down 0.2% or $3 lower to $14.8140 an ounce. The euro 1.1068 against the dollar. The yen at 108.67. Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow straight ahead. For John Tucker, I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
This winter, there's no place like Wicked, the award-winning West End musical. Discover the incredible untold story of the Witches of Oz and how one came to be called good and the other wicked. Wicked at London's Apollo Victoria Theatre. Extra shows added for Christmas.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition. For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked breads to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
Give someone you love what they really want for Christmas. The look. With the fabulous Dyson Supersonic Hairdryer from Curry's PC World. It protects the hair's natural shine with fast drying but no extreme heat. Make yourself extremely popular. Give them a Dyson Supersonic Hairdryer and make anyone's Christmas. Plus, spend £25 or more to get a £5 voucher and a chance to win a £1,000 gift card. At Curry's PC World. Voucher valid on purchases £25 and over. T's and C's apply.
This week at Tesco, buy 2 items from our chilled party food range, like tempura prawns or mozzarella sticks, and get a third one free. So for every 2 people you invite, you can ask another for free. But who? Linda from Accounts or Julio from Magaluf 2010. Tesco, delivering Christmas for 100 years. Cheapest item free selected stores while stocks last, ends 1st of January.
capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
American economic power and future depends on trade deals.
In many of these countries, we're still seeing people struggling.
Finance.
We're in this vortex of uncertainty. These big companies, they just sometimes lack focus.
Investment.
The markets have become a little bit too addicted to the Fed.
Timing the market is just so difficult.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow on Bloomberg Radio.
From New York City for our audience worldwide, good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up on the program, stocks bouncing back. Bloomberg reporting we're still on course for a phase one deal. Even as tensions escalate, Congress pushing to sanction Chinese officials over human rights abuses. China coming into sharper focus for NATO leaders gathering just outside of London. From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, hello Wednesday. Here is your Wednesday morning price action. Equity futures bouncing back. The S&P 500, Tom, up by 15 points and positive around about 0.5%.
Interesting play here. The body language, the photo op at NATO was something, and it really spoke of the tensions and all that versus the market. And John, it really comes down to the heart of the matter. We're going to address this here in about 30 seconds. Buy the dip. It's a great song, but that's the emotion out there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in a 3-year bull market. You just suck it up, you buy the dip, and off you go, except that ugly December.
Bounce off the low this morning, off the back of some reporting from Bloomberg. This is coming from Jenny Leonard of the team.
Yeah, I saw that.
The US and China moving closer to agreeing on the amount of tariffs that would be rolled back in a phase one trade deal, despite tensions over Hong Kong and Xinjiang. This is according to people familiar with the talks.
But we're managing the trade story. But John, this is so important. It's the end of the year. Aren't we supposed to lift at the end of the year just because it's the end of the year? There's a natural bid out there, right?
That was meant to be the story. Didn't happen in 2018 either, did it? The scars of December 2018 meeting the fears of December 2019. With us here in New York, I'm pleased to say, Savita Subramaniam, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, head of US Equity Strategy. Good morning to you, Savita.
Good morning.
What are you telling clients at the moment about December 15th? The line in the sand when tariffs could go on. What is it, $160 billion of Chinese imports? What's the message at the moment?
And it's mostly consumer goods, which is different from what we've seen in the past. You know, I think the message is that if we get some sort of a skinny deal, I think we could see a really strong rally in the more cyclical areas of the market. Because my sense is that the market is actually pricing in a fairly dire scenario on trade. I mean, if you look at what's expensive within the S&P 500, it's utilities, it's consumer staples. These are, the recession stocks of the S&P 500. It's not machinery and retailers. Those are the stocks that are really cheap. So my sense is that the market is actually pricing in not a great outcome from the tariff scenario. Now here I think is where it gets interesting. I don't see the trade war ending even if we get some kind of skinny deal. I think what it turns into is more of a tech war. So I think we're shifting from this trade war, tariffs on soybeans to an environment where I think the real war is around technology, intellectual property, national security, and I think that could continue for a lot longer.
Are you actively telling clients they need to position their portfolios, their equity allocation, with regards to those kind of concerns that you have?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the way to think about this is that tech, which has been a market leader for 10 years running now, is one of the areas that could actually take it on the chin in the near term. I mean, not only do you have tariffs, not only do you have the idea of tech companies having to dislocate their supply chain, but you also have bipartisan support to regulate tech companies. So what I worry about within tech is the same thing that we saw in financials back in 2005. So there's
fair. Yeah. Should I sell my Amazon and Apple? That's all I want to know.
So I think if you're worried about the next year or two, I don't see Amazon and Apple or, just FANG stocks in general, our big cap tech companies, as retaining their leadership. I think they're
even with their revenue growth. If you look at the nominal GDP call Ethan Harris has and your team, you're telling me to get out of revenue growth stocks that are double digit in nature and go over to something with a much less revenue growth scheme?
No, here's the thing. I think that we all kind of know this, but the second derivative story for tech is less positive than it has been in the past.
That's calculus talk on a Wednesday, folks.
But I think the second derivative story for potentially some of the more cyclical areas of the market could actually recover nicely if we see any sort of a resolution on trade in the near term. So I guess when I look at it, I think, okay, here's your tech companies that have crushed it for 10 years, but now they're super crowded. They're arguably a little bit more expensive than they have been in the past. And we're seeing a lot of different catalysts that could unseat that leadership.
I love what you're saying, and I love your smart research deck about how we're going to have this big shift to international, big shift to small and big cap. What will be the proximate catalyst to make that occur? Is it as simple as Fed policy, or do we have to get more equity in nature or yield nature in our analysis?
I don't know if it has to do with the Fed. So I think the biggest driver for rotations in style are the contours of the profit cycle. That's what we found in our quant work. And I think what's important here is we've gone from an environment of very, very slow, decelerating growth to what looks like a reasonable acceleration in growth in 2020. And here's why I say that. So if you look at 2019 this year, it's been flat earnings growth. We've had a flat year on S&P earnings. Next year, without a lot of great economic delivery, we're likely to see a better year. And amidst that pickup, this has historically been the biggest driver for value cycles over growth cycles, for small over large, for rest of world over U.S., is just the idea that we get some kind of a pickup in the profit cycle.
Well, let's get your overweights, Savita. Financials, consumer discretionary, industrials, utilities.
Yeah.
They're your overweights into 2020.
Those are our overweights.
Give me some insight into the conversations you're having at the moment. Where's the pushback coming from?
Yeah, so the pushback is, why the heck are you overweight utilities? Because it's really expensive and it looks like a bond. I guess utilities is our hedge against, things not going well over the next 12 months. And utilities, what I like about it is that it's got a dividend yield that's a couple of percentage points higher than bond yields. And it's basically, it gives you what you think you're getting, regulated earnings growth, relatively smooth. The real pushback that we get is on financials, because financials, everybody thinks we need the yield curve to steepen in order for financials to work. And here I totally disagree. I don't think you need the yield curve to steepen. I think financials is going to start to be acknowledged as a high quality dividend yield sector, which is something that we haven't really seen it as in a very long time. It was the levered toxic sector back in 2007, and I think that's how investors are painting it today. But the truth is, the leverage ratio has been, it's a shadow of its former self. These companies are arguably overcapitalized, and their shareholder yield, if you add up share buybacks and dividend yield, shareholder yield for financials is the highest of all 11 sectors.
Savita, you and I have talked about this many times. For this to work, you need a perception shift. You need investors to sit there and agree with you and not think that everything is just about a 10-year yield and the shape of the yield curve. You've seen evidence of that this year, because actually some of these big names on Wall Street have performed really rather well through 2019. Is that already starting to happen?
I think you're starting to get that acknowledgement that these are different companies than what we saw in 2008. And then, also just the idea that they've been so shunned for so many years that their underweight positions are now arguably risky. If the stocks start to move at all, I think that investors are going to be forced to start adding exposure. Financials is a sector where the average institutional manager is 2 standard deviations below his or her relative exposure to the sector. So that means that they basically hate financials right now.
Okay. We're going to have to leave it there. Savita, thank you so much. Savita Subramanian with us with Bank of America.
Thank you, Savita.
It's a really optimistic view and really stating that this shift will occur. There's been a huge debate, John, on the show.
Have you seen this move in the FX market? Cable at 130.70. The pound.
I can't afford to go to
the
London.
Strongest level.
I'm just staying here.
Versus the euro as well since May 2017. Euro sterling with a little bit of a move as well, Tom. So quite clearly sterling outperforming in foreign exchange today. Cable £1, 137.1. Euro sterling breaking 85 pence.
There's a churn of the market, and dollar yen 108.64. with a churn there as well. And it's a nice bounce off 3 days of carnage. I did the chart, the correction chart. Correction is Dow 25,400. We're 2,100 Dow points from correction.
Counting down points.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Well, 3 points is what we see
of
here.
losses on the S&P 500. We bounce back. Here's your guide for this morning. Tom, in around about 20 minutes' time, the Chancellor, Angela Merkel, sitting down with the President of the United States, Donald Trump, just outside of London. The President scathing about military spending in the last 24 hours.
And unspoken. It's been the great unspoken of the last 48 hours is this relationship with Germany.
And Tom, if you don't get your military spending up to 2% of GDP, what is the threat? The President introducing trade as a tool to push NATO members to get military spending up to 2% of GDP. He actually called out Germany by name, sitting alongside Justin Trudeau yesterday, and I'm going to be fascinated to see whether this happens again in 20 minutes' time.
And we have a press conference, I believe a separate press conference of the President scheduled here. I will suggest that's in 2, even 3 hours. They're a little behind schedule at the Grove. The Grove is north of London.
Your kind of hotel.
It's my kind of hotel.
Your kind
Futures
of
up
hotel.
15. Stay with us. Worldwide, Bloomberg Radio in New York. Good morning.
And now for the news from New York City, here is Michael Barr.
John, Tom, thank you very much. President Donald Trump is meeting with NATO leaders near London as House Democrats get ready to resume their impeachment inquiry into whether he abused his presidential powers. Trump will also hold separate talks with several leaders, including German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Today, the House Judiciary Committee holds its first impeachment hearing in Washington. France is getting ready for nationwide strikes against government plans to overhaul the state pension system that will disrupt trains, buses, and flights and force many schools to close. In Paris, where workers' unions are planning a march tomorrow, police warned of possible violence and damages and ordered all businesses, cafes, and restaurants along the way to close. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg Tom.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Futures up 15, Dow futures up 153. Yields that give back the 3-day lower yield set. The 10-year yield up 2 basis points, 1.73. John Farrow and Tom Keene, stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
In the real world, there are no rabbits in hats, crystal balls, or cards that turn into money. Instead, you get business information from top-tier analysts and experts.
What should expectations be for this latest round of negotiations?
That's actually better, isn't it?
They're both trying to say they have the upper hand.
Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Every investor should ask questions.
Is our money in the right place?
What am I really being charged? And is it eating into my returns?
Is my advisor a fiduciary? Is he always a fiduciary?
A good place to start is with an independent registered investment advisor. As fiduciaries, they live by a simple rule. Always act in the best interest of their clients. That's why Charles Schwab is proud to support more independent financial advisors and their clients than anyone else. Visit findyourindependengadvisor.com.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Yvonne Mann.
Actor and martial artist Juju Jang spoke to Bloomberg Live's Malika Kapoor about whether the success of films like Crazy Rich Asians and The Farewell has been a turning point for Asian artists.
Hollywood has had a pattern of having non-Asian people play the roles of Asian characters. And that's a pattern that seems pretty hard to break. How far are we from a time when it's a given that Asian people will play Asian characters?
It really go back to the producers and the casting people and the investors, because why they are having, Caucasian actors playing these roles are because of the star power. They believe these people can bring in the money, bring in the audience. That's why they will sacrifice casting some people who are actually ethnicity correct for the role, but they cast someone who is actually have a star power or name.
Correct. It's the bankability factor.
Yes. So after that, and actually producers right now are more careful. They will try to find people who are ethnicity correct for the role before reaching to like a star name. The best thing will definitely be getting a star name with the right ethnicity for the role.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And it's 7:17 on Wall Street. Good morning, I'm John Tucker. Bloomberg Daybreak is out on customer terminals, bringing you all the news you need to start your day. And let's check the latest headlines with Hannah George at the Bloomberg Daybreak desk. Hannah, good morning.
Good morning, John. The US and China are close to agreeing on the amount of tariffs to roll back for a Phase 1 trade deal. That's according to sources who say progress is being made despite tension over human rights issues and protests in Hong Kong. Sundar Pichai is taking over Alphabet as Larry Page and Sergey Brin step down. In addition to heading up Google, Pichai will now oversee everything from self-driving cars to delivery drones. OPEC and its allies are giving mixed signals on whether they'll deepen output cuts. Sources tell us an OPEC advisory committee did not discuss steeper cutbacks at its most recent gathering. And Carl Icahn is urging HP to continue takeover talks with Xerox. The activist investor says a tie-up may yield more than $2 billion in synergies. For all the news you need to start your day, check out Daybreak on your mobile phone on the Bloomberg Anywhere app. John.
And Hannah George at the Daybreak desk. Thank you, Hannah. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading right here on Bloomberg Radio, where Dow futures right now up 162 points. That's a rise of 0.6%. S&P futures, they are up 15. The Nasdaq E-mini futures, they are 53 points higher. The yield on the benchmark 10-year note right now at 173. That is up by 2 basis points. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. John and Tom.
Yeah, thanks so much, John Tucker. Greatly appreciate it. You've got this great message, this missive that was thrown out yesterday across the Bloomberg
from this
space.
guy called Michael McKee, who sent me an email and said, after Tom's question on surveillance yesterday, I took a look at the list of the items on the December 15th President Trump China tariff list. Tom was right. It includes item 6116.10.05 ice hockey and field hockey gloves. Also item 6117.80.87 ties, bow ties, and cravats.
There you go.
It proves that the president was wrong and that Mr. Tom Keene is right, that Mr. Keene will be paying the tariffs. Is that right? Mr. Keene's paying the tariffs.
The president has always argued that the Chinese are absorbing the tariffs. It's Tom Keene absorbing the tariffs.
But Michael, what you bring up here, and folks, this is the charm of Mr. McKee. He can do the big picture like Stop Mr. Powell in a press conference. And also, Mike, you more than anyone at Bloomberg with the leadership of Brendan Murray have nailed the granularity that's in that note you sent yesterday. Does the president understand how granular all this trade talk is?
It doesn't appear that he does, but I don't know for a fact.
Mr. Kudlow does.
The people who have designed the tariffs designed them in such a way that they would be hidden from the American people. Now, through companies, however it is, Americans pay the tariffs. The Chinese don't pay the tariffs. But the average citizen hasn't seen a big rise in prices. And the reason is they took all the consumer goods and they left them out of the tariffed items until December 15th, because now we're running out of things to put the taxes on.
Yeah.
And so on December 15th, we get this long list of things, including not just ties and bow ties, but silk ties and bow ties, because Tom's not a polyester guy. But
this is the Tom Keene tariff.
This is French. Madame Lagarde.
Very cool.
This is French.
Look, to Mike's point, by definition, the importer pays the tariff when those goods cross the border, by definition. I think the sequencing of the tariffs does show an appreciation from the administration that these are the goods that matter, because these are the goods that have been left right until the end.
Yeah.
This is the final $160 billion of Chinese imports that haven't had a President Trump
tariff. Which gets you kind of into the game theory of what might happen on December 15th. There's all this talk that if they're still close to a deal or something, the president will postpone it. And putting off the tariffs kept the American people from tariffs on consumer goods, kept the American people from getting angry early. But now he's going into an election year. So maybe there's an added calculation here, because you look at what's on the list. It's men's and women's clothing and shoes. You'd start paying more for that. Cellular telephones, your iPhone, and AirPods. Headphones and AirPods go up.
The AirPods. So you'll
Children's
remember,
toys.
November 20th, the president stood with Tim Cook in that manufacturing facility in Texas, Mike, and talked about making sure that Apple could play on a level playing field with Samsung. I just wonder if December 15th goes through, the next judgment call is what are the carve-outs and who gets the carve-outs?
Yeah. Well, they've already decided on, this has already been through the vetting process. So there may be an exception request.
Right.
But it doesn't look like, unless the president makes a special exception, that Apple's going to be necessarily exempted from this. Hey, anybody who's gone on Amazon and looked for earpods knows there's a dozen different manufacturers who make these things.
Then why
so
do
Apple
they
probably
only want the new AirPods?
That's a whole other question.
You're complaining about the Keene household.
I'm not an expert on
We've
this.
got the Christmas list on all the refrigerator, like all
just
vet bills got one. All of them.
AirPods.
Every single Christmas list is AirPods.
Mike, no country is perfect. But in China right now, we have reports from credible news agencies that upwards of 1 million Muslim minorities have been taken to concentration camps.